Hello, welcome JavaScript lovers to this new edition of the Italian JSday. Today I want to talk about how JavaScript is an oddball. This is made in CSS, by the way. In my career, I've encountered many things specific to our favorite language, which don't sound quite right, to be frank. And I always wanted to do a talk like this one. I've seen so many in the past. But first, something about myself. My name is Massimo Artizzu. I'm a web architect at GELLIFY, which is a company that operates here in Bologna, among other places. You can find me at that handle on GitHub, Mastodon, Blue Sky, and Dev2. And also, you can already find these slides online at that URL. You can take a moment to scan the QR code. If you miss that, don't worry, it will be at the end, so that's okay. So anyway, JavaScript, weird things about JavaScript. And I don't mean this kind of weird things, okay, it's funny, but it doesn't really apply to our everyday jobs. Or these things. This is weird. Okay. I want to talk about unusual syntaxes, forgotten APIs, unexpected behavior that could actually have an impact in our job as JavaScript developers. And it doesn't mean we need to write code like this, which is a very, very verbose way to write that console.jsday. You can try, if you go to the slide, the URL, and copy and paste in your console, it does that. And okay, again, I don't want to talk about an annoyances like this. Of course, we know that sorts alphabetically. So of course that is the problem, but we also have a solution. We all know, basically we all know about this solution. So something deeper. What if instead we have something more complex, like an array of strings, and those strings contain a number? How do we store them? So of course, we want the file13 comes after file2. How do we do that? We can create a specific function. For example, this one. We eliminate the first part, which is the alphabetic part. We take only the numeric part, and we do as usual. But what if things actually get more complicated? For example, for something like this, an array like this, you don't have a unique pattern, but you still want to sort this list alphabetically and numerically at the same time. How can we deal with this? There's no clear solution. But what if I told you this can be done in just one line of JavaScript, basic JavaScript? This like that. Local compare B undefined numeric true. And there you have it. Your array sorted like we wanted. Okay, and some of you may have already used local compare. Raise your hands if you knew about local compare. Probably when you have a list of objects and you want to sort them using one of the properties, you use the local compare. And there you go, you sorted all the planets. But not all of you may know that the local compare actually takes up to 3 arguments. The second one is the local string, and we passed undefined because we don't need it, actually. And the third is a set of options, which is the same set of options or another less known API, which is the collator API. And actually, local compare has been specified to be equivalent to this. So internally, just create an instance on intro.collator and use its compare function. And it's been like that for a while, for a very long while. Now, okay, it's good, all is good, but can we ask ourselves, this code is good for our code base? Can we actually use it? So I'm going to introduce a metric, which is the welcome technology factor, or WTF for short. Okay, for the question, should I ask that, some techniques, you take your personal evaluation and just multiply by the WTF value. It's simple as that. Okay, so for example, we take the plus operator. Okay, should we use that, the plus operator? Yes, of course you should use the plus operator. What else do you use? So we give a WTF value of 10. Okay, what about writing code like this? This is a big no-no. Okay, never 0. We give it a 1 because there must be a reason for writing code like that. After all, if you know we can do that, there's a side to, of course, compile your code like that, okay? But if there's a reason, maybe it's never 0. Okay, what about local compare? So I say I give it an 8, just because your team might be aligned to learn about local compare. But other than that, okay, go for it, I did. Okay, talking about collator again, if we have a very large list, we can actually use the collator instance instead of local compare because it optimizes the resources. The only problem is it sorts in just one direction, in the ascending direction. If we want the opposite, we can, of course, use, reverse. There's nothing like that. And you feel, if you feel triggered by the use of all these methods which mutate the array, the original array, well, I'm going to use for you. Because recently have been introduced non-mutating alternatives of all those methods. So here's some migration tables, and it also is widely supported for a couple of years already. And what else is left? Yeah, for example, we had a way to cut an array short, which is setting the length property. We don't have a new method for that because we already have one, which is slice. What's actually left is fill. We don't have to fill method. I don't know why. We have to still rely on map. Other than that, okay, let's see. Should we use them? Of course, absolutely use them. And you may ask, why not a 9 or a 10? Let me explain. If you create an array like that, what do you get? It's 3 empty slots. What's happening? And if you apply one of those non-mutating methods from before, you get 3 undefined slots. What's the difference? What's happening? What is, we already had null, we had undefined, now we have empty for some reason. Well, empty is actually the reason why you can create an array like that. And you get, we iterate over that, and you get a whole bunch of nothing. It's also the reason why when you create an array very big, 4 billion items, it does that in a blink of an eye, because JavaScript internally, what's an array? It's not a series of allocated memory portions. No, typed arrays are that, but not regular arrays. So internally in JavaScript, an array is an hash map. An hash map, which is translated into a so-called sparse array. A sparse array is a map where some of its indexes are missing, so they're represented as empty slots. When you use one of those to reverse, to sort, etc., it fills with undefined, and all of a sudden you have to allocate 32 gigabytes of memory, and you don't know why. And browsers say, no, 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 no. We don't have 32 gigabytes. And even if we had, I'd allocate it for myself, not for you. So watch out. What about about null, for example? What happens here? What do you expect? It throws an error. Okay, cannot convert undefined or null to object. Fair enough. Although, okay, we know that It's a mistake. It's been a mistake, a very annoying mistake, because every time I want to check if an object exists, I cannot just do that. I also have to do this to check if it's not null, and it's annoying as heck. Uh, so I would be much happier if I could do something like this. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't exist, sorry. What can we actually do with null? Okay, we have null. What if we spread this null into an object? What happens here? It happens just nothing. No properties get added to the object. And the same applies also to other kind of values. For example, undefined, a function, a boolean, a number, an empty string, only empty string, watch out. All of those values don't add additional properties and don't throw. And the same happens also in TypeScript. In TypeScript, you can do the same. TypeScript doesn't complain unless it is certain that the object is actually null, and then it throws. It complains. Okay, in this case, you can always use object.assign. You should be fine. Okay, and it gets better. Because let's suppose we have an item, an object like that. We want to know if we need to spread this object onto another using a flag, has hyphen in this case. Instead of using the usual ternary, in this case, deciding whether to spread the item or an NP object, we can just use something like this, using this technique that's called short circuiting. Remember when I told you that Booleans, when spread, don't add additional properties? That's the case. Should we use this? Okay. I'd say 7, because to be fair, short circuiting is not the most readable thing to do with JavaScript, with this syntax. Um, Even though in recent years, especially the React community got used to it, maybe, okay? It's a matter of convenience for your team, I'd say. Okay, let's keep focusing on null. What if we use null? It's an object, right? We use null as a superclass. What happens here? This is weird. Well, JavaScript doesn't complain either. You can do that. But then we create an instance of our new class, and super construction null of Oddball is not a construction. Okay, why would you allow me to do that in the first place? Only to just define the static properties, static methods, and whatever. Hey, wait a minute. What's this? What is that? It's a static class initialization block. It's a piece of code that gets executed when the class is defined. So as you may expect, if we do JavaScript.version, you get what you expect. Okay, but it isn't very interesting actually, because we can do the same with that. It's a much clearer syntax, much more common. Everybody knows about that. The problem is actually most of the examples you find online about static initialization block are something like this, and it is not very good. Looks cool, but you can do the same with a more familiar syntax to accomplish something so common. What's the point? If we want to really understand why we choose a static initialization block, we need a case where it takes advantage of the fact that it is defined inside the class and that has access to the class scope. Let's see an example. We have a class named safe, and we have a secret inside the class. Okay, so far so good. Now we, as library developers, we want to access to the secret inside the safe instances, but we don't want third-party code, consumer code, to actually access to the secret. How should we do that? We cannot, of course, use a getter function or something similar, because basically it means that the secret is public now. It defines the usage of a private field in this case. So how should we do this? Okay, we take our class ticket. We want to use a function that help us read the secret inside the instance of the class. We will use this read secret internally in the library, but we will not expose it. And then, static initialization block, we set the read secret to a function. Inside the static initialization block, we can read the private field. And so it works. Huge if true. I'm so sorry. Okay, let's give a WTF level to this technique. And I give it a 7 again, because this syntax isn't very common. Actually, I don't think it will ever be, because there are not many use cases, but you found one, well, use it, of course. And since we are talking about objects, let's talk about JavaScript object notation. You know what it is? This JSON. As you know, the most common object notation in JS-based projects, of course, that thankfully it replaced XML a while ago. And he loves JavaScript. Not. He doesn't love JavaScript. It's not because when you try to serialize this kind of object, you get nothing, okay? And that is why also you shouldn't use something like this. I've seen too many times in my life to just create a clone of an object. No, we have something more modern, which is a structured clone, which also has a kind of wide support right now. In these 4 years, it is available, or maybe longer. And also it maintains undefined values, and although it doesn't copy symbol properties. And okay, so should we use structural clone? And 8. 8, only 8. Why not 9? Because the point is, I don't know why, structural clone is actually slower than JSON parse, JSON stringify. I don't know why, but it's consistently among all the browsers and then all the engines. Okay, maybe if you want to be fast, use JSON parse, JSON stringify. But anyway, structural clone does better than that in any case. So pick your choice. But okay, our target actually, I want to talk about something else. For example, we want to produce a JSON like that one. Okay, the point is JSONs can have arbitrarily large numbers. For example, that one is very large. It's an interchange format, so it doesn't care about language limitation, not even JavaScript limitation. But now JavaScript has arbitrarily large integers already. Okay, they are called begins. So what happens if we stringify our begins? Apparently, JavaScript doesn't know how to stringify a number, even though begins do have the toString method. Who gives? Okay, let's find the solution. Now we are at it, and okay, we define the toJSON method on the prototype of begins, because some of you may know, if we defined a toJSON method on an object and you stringify that object using JSON.stringify, that method gets called in order to actually serialize the object. But some of you might be terrified by the fact that I'm extending the prototype of a native class. And we shouldn't do that. After all, it's the reason why instead of having array flattened, we have to settle for array flat. And we got used to it. Instead of array.contains, we need to use array includes. And we got used to it. Instead of array.groupby, we have to use object.groupby. And honestly, I'm still bitter about this one. Okay, but in this specific case, it's okay, because according to MDN, it's one of the few cases where patching built-in objects is not explicitly discouraged. Okay, so let's give it a WTF value of 8, okay, and move on. Okay, let's define this toJSON method, maybe, using this operator, which is the Nullish coalescing assignment operator. Whoa, that's a mouthful. Anyway, it's well supported and it makes our code kind of future-proof because if there is already a toJSON method, then it keeps it, otherwise it defines it. Okay, and then we say return this to string. Then you apply stringify, and now it does that, and we are done. Or are we? What are those? Those are double quotes. We don't know, we don't want them. And why did it happen? Because the toJSON method that isn't meant to return the serialized object. It's meant to return a value that could be serialized, and then it gets serialized. So if we return a string, it serializes a string. So that's why we have double quotes. How do we fix this? Again, we have just one line of a solution. We have this one, json.rowJSON. Okay, it's kind of new. It returns a special object that should be used in JSON.stringify alone. So we call JSON.stringify, and then we have it. Yee, we are done. The only problem here is that Safari doesn't support it yet. Okay, we have to provide a polyfill. There's a polyfill, unfortunately. Okay, what about the opposite? We start from a JSON, and we want to create a JSON JavaScript object out of it. We should use json.parse, of course. And then that's the problem, because in the conversion, we lost precision. So some of you may say, I can use a reviver function. The reviver is the second argument of json.parse. Except, no, you don't. Because when you use it like that, value has already been converted to a number, so it already has lost the precision. What else? Okay, now we have a reviver that can take up a third argument, which is the context argument. And you may guess how now we can use that, of course. Then again, the problem is Safari doesn't still support it. You have to provide a polyfill. Okay, we don't say that Safari is the new Internet Explorer. Okay, okay, just maybe in this case. The problem is we don't want to transform every value into a big int. Of course, we want to know when a value, a source, is actually a big integer. So we have a discriminating function, which is big int. And now we have to define it. Okay, we need to know where it comprises only of digits. But then we need something else. There must be something that tells us when a numeric string is greater than another. Oh, golly, it's only a good old friend, locale compare with numeric true. Personally, I love when a language comes together like that, but it doesn't mean there are not any problems in the language itself, in its syntax, even in its classic one. Okay, let's talk about the switch. Who likes switch? Some of you. Who prefers if? Okay. The problem is switch is kind of awkward, to be honest. At the first glance, this code snippet looks fine, but then you notice you must give it a break, and then maybe a default case. It's verbose, it's boring. That's why so many of us use ifs, a bunch of ifs, which is even more versatile, specifying the conditions. But what if I told you we can do way better with switch too? Okay, so we can take a switch. We put true inside the parentheses as the comparison table, not a variable, but a value. And then our usual case. What happens here? It executes the first case whose condition is strictly true. Okay? So we still use, we still need to use break or return, but now we can express whatever condition we want, like an if. And even better if you're a strict typing aficionado, because every comparison is done strictly and not loosely like in an if. It's like having already pattern matching in JavaScript. So for example, we can use to apply to decide whether React node is one of those terms. Okay, okay. And the third condition may be true, the fourth one doesn't get executed. We are good. Huge switch through. I'm sorry, okay. Anyway, jokes aside, should we use a switch through? Okay, let's give it a WTF value. What do you say? 2. Okay, I give it a 4. Because to be honest, it's so unexpected that you might feel mentally violated by this. So my suggestion is don't use in production. Use maybe in your personal project if you want to feel cool. Anyway, we cannot talk about odd stuff in JavaScript without considering the first most exemplary environment where JavaScript was born and has grown, which is the DOM. The DOM, which is so full of weird stuff that you might argue that the name comes from their favorite drink, but slightly it's most historic, document object model. So technically, there are not JavaScript APIs, but web APIs, but they show how JavaScript has been used for them. We will see something weird. And no, not, not something like this. We won't talk about that, which apparently doesn't even exist. And you may ask, what should you use? How am I supposed to get the list of all elements in a page? Very common question. Okay, we have an alternative, of course. But what if we want actually text nodes or comment nodes or select elements with no value or elements wider than 80 pixels? Well, we have not one, but two APIs to do that. There's this one, very similar one, tree walker and node iterator API. And they will be available for a while, a very long while. They're supported by Internet Explorer 9, which came out in 2010, 2009, as old as Node.js. And I must tell you, they are one of the most adorably Java-fashioned API that you can ever meet. So how do they work? We take a root node, and then we decide what we're looking for, what kind of nodes we are looking for. For example, text node, and then it does it, it cycles between all the text nodes inside your node. Simple as that. How do we create it? We won't use a new class, no, because we use a factory function. You can already smell the Java here, okay? We pass the root node, we tell it what kind of node we're interested in, using an enum, of course, and a bit mask, because that's how you do that in Java, apparently, in the old days. And then we provide an additional filtering function. We should return again an enum value again. These are the raw symbols. Or you can pass an object with an accept node method and do the same, basically the same. We can go full Java 7 on this, basically. And again, okay, we have this one. Oh, wow, so verbose. And then at this point, we can use the next node, previous node, and some other methods which are only available in tree workers and not in node iterator. Anyway, should we use this? I'd say just a 7 because they are kind of awkward to use in 2025. Maybe you can wrap them in generating functions. And then I bet you won't have to look for comment nodes in everyday job. But maybe if you do, okay, use that. And that is for getting nodes. But what about creating nodes? Of course, we have create elements and the others, but also we have this one. And we have already done for a very long while, again, very long, since the Internet Explorer 6, which came out in 2001. Now here, who's been born in 2001 or later? Here. Yes, Christian, you have been born in 2007, I think. Okay. Nobody? Okay. Because in that case, those functions would be older than you. They're kind of awkward to use. Maybe we can still find them appropriate. Okay, how do they work? Element dot insert adjacent whatever, textual argument, the position, and then stuff. Stuff, okay, which can be a text, HTML, or element and nodes. Position can be one of those 4 values: before begin, after begin, before end, after end, and that's okay. Let's visualize how do we use them. Okay, for example, we have this markup. We focus on the article. Our element is the article. And we say, okay, we say before begin, then it's the place where their stuff will be put before the article. And then after begin, before the first element, before end, and after end. It's all clear. Okay, but actually, nowadays we have something way better, which is, for example, this function append. It can take DOM node or a string, which is conveniently translated into a text node. And more than one, it can take multiple. And of course, there are also other alternatives to the other positions. So prepend, before, after. So, okay. And also they are widely available too. So I think WTF level on this one. I'll say, okay, it's a 9. It's good. Use them if you have to manipulate the DOM nodes by yourself. So after all of this, what should we do with all of this? I think the first 2 should be gone. Not interested anymore. What about the third one? The third one, maybe some of you might say it should be equivalent to something like this, but actually it's not, because if you do that, it will replace all the HTML inside the element. So it will replace all the existing elements, and all the you lose all the element listener, the internal states, and all the references. Using elements inside adjacent HTML, you do not. You just add some elements, and you keep all the rest. So should we use that? I'd say it's still a 3. Because to be fair, normally we don't have to deal with DOM manipulation like that anymore. We don't pass around raw HTML. We prefer to use libraries to generate and inject nodes around. But then I actually use that for console experiment and debugging purposes. And so it's been quite handy in my experience. So maybe consider it just for debugging. And okay, that's all I have for you today. I would like to leave you with this thought. The JavaScript ecosystem is so vast, so full of history and literature, that there's always something to learn. And learning takes us to new perspective, rediscover ways of solving problems, and we can apply that to our everyday job. And if in the meanwhile we will face all quirkiness, well, I think it's part of the fun. Thank you.